Right now, Christians are under attack in Ukraine. In this program, you'll hear voices from all over the globe, sharing stories of the persecution of members of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church and the lawyers who have been trying to help them. From the halls of the U.S. Senate,
the Ukrainian parliament is considering enacting a law that would dispossess large numbers of Christian churches and Christian communities. I believe, standing here, that this war will eventually lead to the displacement of a massive Christian community in Ukraine, and that will be our shame.
To journalists in Kiev.
They were trying to arrest us. The conditions of keeping people there is mostly terrible. Pretty much looks like torture.
To clerics in the Ukrainian countryside.
Например, обливают краской ступеньки, двери, кафедральный собор в Черкасах.
To Ukrainian soldiers on the front lines.
Мене звати Расторгуй Дмитро Федорович.
I love my country and I love Ukraine. I also love the Ukrainian Orthodox faith.
To Washington, D.C. with a former member of U.S. Congress.
The world has seen that clergy and parishioners of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church continue to be intimidated, beaten, and imprisoned.
And to London, to the law firm representing the oppressed Ukrainian Orthodox Church.
Elements within the government have declared war on the UOC, and they have persecuted mercilessly priests, clerics, parishioners.
It's disgraceful, and I've expressed that directly to the Speaker of the House, who says he's a Christian. How can you pay for the persecution of Christians with U.S. tax dollars?
This is Christians Under Siege, Ukraine.
My name is Robert Amsterdam, and I am counsel to the Ukrainian Orthodox Church, the largest church in Ukraine, but a church which is under fire. Under fire because the Ukrainian government is attempting to pass a bill that will ban the church and essentially destroy it. And this video that you will see is going to explain why, and it's going to explain how. And I think it's important for all men of faith to pay attention to what's happening in Ukraine, because it's happening with the assistance, and some would argue, the direction of the United States government. Firstly, let's get one thing clear. All of us pray for the survival of Ukraine and success of Ukraine in its existential fight for its freedom. That is not up for debate. The people that you will listen to in this video are Ukrainian patriots. They are, however, under attack, disenfranchised, and in some cases, brutally beaten and jailed for their beliefs.
The Ukrainian government has been engaged in a systematic takedown of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church for several years now. A multi-pronged attack. They've introduced a troublesome bill in the Rada to outlaw the church. They've used arcane legal tricks to steal church buildings and property, as well as an onslaught of thuggery and physical violence to intimidate parishioners into not attending. They've even started arresting UOC clerics, with almost 70 arrests of clergy documented by the United Nations, and now stories of priests being taken as hostages, charged with false crimes and told they will be bargained away from their homeland to obtain the release of Ukrainian prisoners. The Ukrainian government has used the false narrative of combating any alliance between the Ukrainian Orthodox Church and Russia as a cover for this outright theft of the oldest church in Ukraine. But the UOC officially divested itself of Russia years ago and faithfully serves Ukraine as she has for almost 1,000 years. UOC members are Ukrainian patriots. Here are some UOC members who have joined the war effort and are on active duty on the front lines, risking their lives fighting for Ukraine and sharing their stories of Ukrainian patriotism.
I want to appeal now to those who incite interreligious enmity between the Ukrainian people. Whoever wants to ban it seems to be some kind of Moscow patriarchate. In Ukraine, there is no Moscow patriarchate, no Moscow churches, no Moscow priests. There is a Ukrainian Orthodox canonical independent church that has always been with its people. always helped the army, and with the beginning of a full-scale invasion, Metropolitan Onufriy immediately condemned the actions of the Russian Federation and blessed all Ukraine to protect its land. It is simply impossible to imagine how much the Ukrainian Orthodox Church is currently helping refugees and the army. This is hundreds of tons of humanitarian aid, transfer vehicles to military, body armor, thermal images, food products, uniforms. Please do not stir up enmity. Do not make the people to be enemies of each other. We have one enemy now. This is the Russian Federation.
I'm a junior surgeon and combat medic here on the front lines, protecting our dear Ukraine. I'm also an Orthodox Christian of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church of Metropolitan Onufriy. With pain in my heart, I'm watching persecuting of my faith.
There are many people like me, Orthodox guys, who defend their native Ukraine. We have been fighting the Russian aggressor since the first days of the war. I would like to ask you, dear friends, to stop persecuting the Ukrainian Orthodox Church. This is an appeal to Mr. President, to many people who go against our Orthodox Church. We fight for our people, and even more for our faith. I've been fighting since the beginning of the war, and I went to fight voluntarily, although I have a disability and am already 58 years old. I am a member of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church. My only son serves at the Lavra. Dear Ukrainians, what are you doing? There is a war going on in Ukraine, and you want to make religious enmity.
Here in the United States, we recently celebrated Memorial Day and a special recognition to those remaining World War II veterans here in the United States who helped to save the world from fascism. Yet at the same time we were doing great things abroad, here in the United States, we were doing some horrific things to our own citizens, Japanese Americans, who were being taken out of their homes, off of their farms, arrested and put in internment camps. It was a national disgrace. The same thing is happening right now in Ukraine. We appreciate the fact that the Ukraine government is fighting against Russian authoritarianism. They're fighting the Russian aggression and beating back, hopefully, the invasion of Russia into Ukraine. While at the same time, they are taking on their own church, the Ukrainian Orthodox Church, the largest and oldest church in the Ukraine. The world has seen that clergy and parishioners of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church continue to be intimidated, beaten, and imprisoned. The UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, Volker Turk, found that there is no evidence, as the Ukrainians allege, that the Russian Orthodox Church is causing the Ukrainian Orthodox Church to commit crimes against the state. And even if that were true, they wouldn't be able to ban a large church of 3 million people with 8,000 different churches. They would have to bring specific evidence against whoever was responsible for acting against the state, and there is no such evidence. In addition to moving against their own Ukrainian Orthodox Church, they are attempting now with a piece of legislation, Bill 8371, to outlaw that church. That law, 8371, has been found to be unlawful in respect to both the Ukrainian Constitution and the international covenants to which the Ukraine is bound. That was a finding by attorneys for the Rada, the Ukrainian parliament. They said that the bill violates several provisions of the Ukrainian Constitution, even the context of martial law. Certain fundamental rights, including the right of free practice of religion, cannot be violated. The law also violates international covenants on civil and political rights of the European Convention and jurisprudence of the European Court on Human Rights. So given that their own attorneys have found these problems with this piece of legislation, what will the Rada do? It's expected they'll pass the bill anyway. We hope that between now and then there's enough of a public outcry that would buck members of the Rada to give them the courage to go against this piece of legislation and understand that it is unconstitutional and does violate the international norms to which they are bound.
The United Nations has taken notice. In regards to the proposed legislation outlawing the Ukrainian Orthodox Church, the Assistant Secretary General for the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights expressed concern over government actions targeting the Ukrainian Orthodox Church. She said, international law permits restrictions on the freedom to manifest religion only if they are prescribed by law and necessary to protect public safety, order, health, or morals, or the fundamental rights and freedoms of others. She then urged lawmakers to clearly define the specific legitimate aim of the proposed restrictions. Since February 2022, the UN has documented numerous cases of physical violence and is concerned that Ukrainian law enforcement's response in these cases has been, quote, inadequate. In addition, the UN notes that almost 70 criminal cases have been brought against Ukrainian Orthodox clergy members, and they've expressed concerns regarding the fairness of these criminal proceedings.
If I were speaking directly to a member of the Rada, I would say vote no on the bill outlawing the Ukrainian Orthodox Church, because such a vote for, would break every one of Ukraine's supposed commitments to democracy, to human rights, and the law. It would simply give the lie.
Например, обливают краской.
For example, they pour paint on the steps, the doors of the cathedral. In Cherkasy, paste blasphemous posters, for example, where the image of the Blessed Virgin Mary, revered by every Orthodox Christian believer, is presented in a sacrilegious form, from such which you shudder when you see such a thing.
Metropolitan Ufrintis clergy have supported the Ukrainian war effort, have given no indication whatsoever of, well, shall we say, unpatriotic sentiments. The state persists and has grown more fierce in its opposition to the Ukrainian Orthodox Church, jailing clergy, threatening imprisonment, and threatening generally the entire de-legalization of the church. This is an obvious breaking of American and certainly European norms regarding the separation of church and state and freedom of religion.
This is Serhiy Chertlin, an archpriest of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church. Archpriest Chertlin has been arrested and is currently in jail for leading services of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church. This is a video he made criticizing the acts of the Ukrainian government against the church.
The Constitution of Ukraine defines our fatherland as a secular state, where the state is separated from the church. The Constitution states that there can neither be discrimination or privileges be religious affiliation. But why then does the government of Ukraine get involved in church matters? Can it regulate the issue of canonicality, service life, or the relationship with which the representatives of religious organizations live? No, but it does, despite the Constitution and the protests of the people. 2019 was the starting point for the intervention of the authorities into the life of the church, where one law was adopted, 26738. The main victim of this law so far has been the Ukrainian Orthodox Church, the largest confession in independent Ukraine.
In his presentation, Archpriest Chertlin points to 4 reasons that the UOC does not support Russia. On the first day of the war, Metropolitan Onofriy condemned Russian aggression.
Українська православна церква завжди була, є і буде своїм народом.
The Ukrainian Orthodox Church helps the Ukrainian army. The Ukrainian Orthodox Church buries Ukrainian warriors. And the Ukrainian Orthodox Church suffers from Russian aggression.
Русские твари попали в наш Преображенский спорт. Строили всю Одессу. Попало прямо вот все в хлам. Просто разрушили.
Archpriest Chertlin also tells the story of one congregation who has been kicked out of their church and now rides bicycles to the forest to have church there.
Але справжня і щира віра завжди перемагає. Неможливо відірвати від Бога тих, хто його вже знайшов. Забрати стіни можна, а віру не так просто. І ось парафіяни нині служать літургію в липовій рощі. Навіть не біля храму, а у лісі, за межами села. Аби на них не накинулися, не скривдили.
While this persecution has been happening, not many in the West are speaking about it. Recently, though, on the floor of the U.S. Senate, Senator J.D. Vance of Ohio had this to say about the persecution of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church.
What about the assault on traditional Christian communities? The Ukrainian parliament is considering enacting a law that would dispossess large numbers of Christian churches and Christian communities in the country of Ukraine. And maybe some of the churches are too close to Russia, but you don't deprive an entire religious community of their religious freedom because some of its adherents don't agree with you about the relevant conflict of the day.
Senator Vance then went on to speak about how the discourse about the Ukrainian conflict has gotten so lopsided, with any critical thinking being mischaracterized as unpatriotic.
There's this weird way where the debate in this country has gotten warped, where people can't engage in good faith disagreement with our Ukraine policy. You will immediately be attacked for being on the wrong team. This war fever, this inability for us to actually process what's going on in our world, to make rational decisions, is the scariest part of this entire debate. You see people who served their country, who have been advocating for good public policies, agree or disagree with them, for their entire careers, smeared as agents of a foreign government simply because they don't like what we're doing in Ukraine. When you see your fellow Americans making an argument, and the response to that argument is not, well, no, here's why you're wrong, or here's substantively why I disagree with you, but they fling their finger in your face and say, you're a Putin puppet. You're an asset of a foreign regime. This way of making decisions democratically is how we bankrupt this country and start a third world war. We should stop doing it.
Senator Vance then drew parallels from the current conflict in Ukraine to the U.S. involvement in Iraq and how that caused a major decrease in the number of practicing Christians still in that country. Let's take a look.
Well, in Iraq, before we invaded, there were 1.5 million Christians in Iraq. Now, nearly every single one of those historical Christian communities is gone. I believe, standing here, that this war will eventually lead to the displacement of a massive Christian community in Ukraine, and that will be our shame.
My name is Nikolai Moisenko. I'm a Ukrainian journalist and a co-founder of the international human rights organization, Ukraine Without Religious Repression. On the 12th of March 2024, they made a series of searches and arrests. They arrested 3 journalists of the Union of Orthodox Journalists, one of the biggest Orthodox media in Ukraine, including me. I am one of the journalists they were searching for. After they were arrested, they were put in a pretrial detention center. We called it SIZO. There is such a practice in Ukraine that you can keep the person in this SIZO, in this pretrial center, as long as you want. The conditions of keeping people there is mostly terrible. Also, they arrested Father Sergei. Father Sergei is a human rights activist for his actings in protection of Ukrainian Orthodox Church. They denied him in surgery with no reason. And they deny Andriy Ovcharenko, one of the Orthodox journalists, in medical observation with no reason. Pretty much looks like torture. They torture these people, they punish them for the truth, punish them for the information about this illegal persecution of Ukrainian Orthodox Church, because they need public to be silent about their crimes. And this is what they are afraid of. They're afraid of publicity, they're afraid of this information of their crimes is being spread. That's why they are attacking journalists and very popular priests and popular bishops. They're prosecuted by the SBU and government.
Військовослужбовець Збройних сил України, а більш всередині тилу люди в формі ламають храми, б'ють батюшок, б'ють український народ, ламають. Чому я пішов добровільно на фронт? Другі мені ламають у військовій формі храми і кажуть, що я є московський. Чому це так? Де та справедливість? Коли вона вже буде?
As somebody who is not only an Orthodox Christian, but a US citizen, I'm horrified as to what's occurring in Ukraine right now and the persecution of millions of loyal Ukrainian citizens for their religious beliefs. Most Americans aren't aware that the largest church in the country is at threat of being outlawed. Millions of men and women and families, members of the Ukrainian armed forces, are set to lose their core religious belief. The United States should be about freedom. We should be about religious liberty. We should be about human rights. I implore everybody to learn more about what's going on. Take action. Speak to your elected representatives, because if there's one thing we as the United States should stand for, it should be human rights and religious liberty, and this is what is under threat in Ukraine right now.
The General Synod of the Church of England voted in favor of a resolution expressing concerns about human rights violations related to Draft Law 8371. A Draft Law 8371 is intended to outlaw the Ukrainian Orthodox Church. The paper that goes with the resolution notes that Draft Law 8371 threatens Ukraine's social cohesion at a time when it needs a unified societal response to Russian aggression, and it encourages an ethno-religious nationalism that will be detrimental to Ukraine's long-term Western trajectory. It does not recognize the great lengths that the Ukrainian Orthodox Church has taken to distance itself from the Russian Orthodox Church, or the fact that many of its members serve faithfully as Ukrainian citizens in the country's armed forces.
One of the most reliable and honest voices on this question is a man called Bob Amsterdam. A little background on Bob Amsterdam. He is a lawyer. He represents the Ukrainian Orthodox Church. He is not a Ukrainian Orthodox Christian. He is, in fact, Jewish. I think he's probably pretty liberal. He's not pro-Russia. He is, in fact, banned from going to Russia. A couple of his friends were murdered in Russia.
Well, thank you, Tucker. And to be transparent, I supported the bill because it is the parishioners of our church who are on the front line.
Right.
And they need all the help they can get. The Ukrainian Orthodox Church is a church that is guided and bound by God's words. It is a church that is 1,000 years old, and its priests are dedicated to Christ's teachings and, in fact, separated themselves completely from the Russian Orthodox Church in 2022 after the full-scale invasion. And I want to make it very clear. There are studies in Ukraine that demonstrate that our church is exactly as nationalistic and patriotic as the new state church that was founded 5 years ago. However, elements within the government have declared war on the UOC, and they have persecuted mercilessly priests, clerics, parishioners, and I knew that it was a tremendous risk to go to Ukraine after having spoken out so strongly against this attack, but I had to go. The country is run by an organization called the SBU, the Secret Police, heavily infiltrated even today by Russia. The parliamentary members, I met with 8, they are under incredible pressure from the secret police. In fact, they were all interviewed and interrogated after I left. A number of them had previously been subjected to interrogations. The priests I met a number of them who had been beaten and interrogated in the past. And in fact, one of them, after my meeting with him, had his home raided the next day. And he was dealt with so harshly, he suffered a heart attack. I was followed everywhere. Ukraine not only has shut the media, but they have become a font of disinformation. They just received, well, in fact, they just spent $3.5 million in Washington to tell Americans that everything they're doing to the Ukrainian Orthodox Church isn't happening. And that, in fact, it's the Russians who are persecuting Christians and not them. To which I say, any persecution of Christians is wrongful, but it is to Ukraine that professes democracy and freedom. And it is Ukraine that has absolutely no semblance of rule of law, that is terrorizing its own business community separately, targeting wealthy people for expropriation, especially if they have any religious connection to our church. And it is Ukraine that is actively setting the SBU, secret police, on individuals like myself who speak out on behalf of this religion. And let me tell you, since the passage of the bill in the House, Ukraine has gone into full war mode against my church. They are launching a massive PR campaign internally and again in Washington, attacking the church, attacking me, attacking everyone connected with the church, because they can't stand the truth to come out. So what is shameful about our American conduct is what Robert Destro, the former Undersecretary for Human Rights, said, which is that some of this targeting of the church came from Washington, that it was partially planned because Washington saw our church, which had a spiritual connection to Russia, as somehow being a threat. And I want to stress that our church is Ukrainian. Many of the men on the front line are members of our church who sit there and watch day by day as secret police wearing death masks come and steal their religious home. Imagine how they feel knowing that their parents and their families are losing their places of worship. And if a new bill is passed, Bill 8371, they won't even be able to gather to pray because the churches will be taken from them, but it may even be a crime for them to meet and pray. This unlimited attack on this historic church is unconscionable, and I am absolutely heartbroken that American Christians have not taken up this fight. We're filing a document with the United States Commission on International Religious Freedom. This is going to be available publicly to everyone. It's a lengthy document that urges the United States government to find Ukraine a country of particular concern because of their attacks on religious freedom. The Holy Synod of the Church of England has condemned Ukraine. Not only that, the United Nations continuously condemns Ukraine for their attacks on Christians. So why it takes the Church of England to stand up, but American churches and evangelists have not, that again is a question that defies logic. So all of this talk of democracy is complete farce. And how we continue to listen to this and how we don't try to build up Ukrainian institutions and why our business people are talking about investing in Ukraine without getting guarantees about rule of law. All of this defies imagination. In fact, somebody is on trial, a guy named Shilo. He is on trial in Ukraine for vast corruption, and no one's talking about his relationship to the presidential administration. So this ongoing predation, corporate raiding of churches, which the Ukrainians have pioneered, this illegal raiding of churches is something I've never seen. And if you go to our website, Save the UOC, you will see hundreds and hundreds of churches and parishioners crying and screaming and priests being beaten. And these are our allies. We are asking Americans to whom the Ukraine owes a tremendous debt to simply speak to the Ukrainian government. Ask the members of the Rada not to pass this bill, to protect their brothers and sisters who are worshipers of Christ, to allow them to continue to pray in the religious temples and churches within which they have grown up and their communities have prospered for this war of aggression. Thank you.